Good morning, beloved. Welcome back. Friday afternoon. We made it through another week. I wanted to open today's show with something I think that we're all dealing with, and kind of expand on a conversation that Mrs. W. and I had this week about why is it that because of the last couple of years we have been unable to see eye to eye with family members, friends, co-workers over things that seem somewhat trivial, but we can't seem to come to agreement on it. There's a new term that's out and about on the internet that I've never heard before, and it's no contact. And I first started hearing it, maybe a year ago or so, of people saying, I've initiated no contact with my loved ones, with my parents, with my children, primarily is where you hear that. From both sides. Primarily, the first time I started hearing it were from our friends on the left side, that they just can't get with their parents or their dad's conservative views, traditional values, and there is no way, even though that they are a blood relative, there is no way to come together and to get along. And they're initiating what they're calling no contact. Now, I've never heard of this in the past. I certainly come from a very dynamic family of opinionated and hard-headed people, and there's always been things that we've disagreed on, that our worldview has been very different. But even though it might come to a frank discussion or even an argument at family gatherings from time to time, it never did really affect the underpinning of the family, which was, blood, really. And that seems to have changed after COVID. It seems that folks are a lot more polarized. This is happening not only within families, but people that you work with and friends. We've been fond of talking about it here. We've talked about it many times. About how we just cannot get with, we can't understand where people are coming from. We can't see their point of view. And if you were, the thing that's very frustrating, I think those of us, most of us that are on the conservative side of things, when we hear social issues and such, most of us are willing to take a look at it, to hear your grievance. What is it that's bothering you? What's the problem with society? Let's have a discussion about it. Maybe we can come up with something that works for everyone. That's really kind of been the mentality. As long as it's not touching on critical things like belief systems or faith or things, just our foundational core values, I think most of us have been willing to meet in the middle and make compromises. And that's really what has been going on this entire time. When you're a logical, considerate person, your default position is to think, well, if I could just explain my side, my perspective, I'm sure that everyone would be able to see things clearly. We should all be able to get along. Do we not all want the same things? Do we want to have a comfortable home and clean water to drink and energy independence and maybe a little bit of extra money where we can have some fun and grill some steaks once in a while? We're not asking for a ton of things, but just some basic things. But what we're finding is we're meeting a wall of resistance where the opposition is unwilling to make any concessions whatsoever. And I don't care how kind and considerate and patient you are, it comes at a point when you're dealing with people, if they're unwilling to take the smallest step towards you, and it's always you that needs to make the concession, always you that needs to make the compromise, et cetera, you've got to get to a point to realize, this is just not going to be possible. As much as I want this to work, as much as I would like to maintain this friendship, it's just simply not going to be possible. And those of us, I think, that are on the more conservative side of things are a little bit slow at getting at that. Still not believing that we can't reach across the aisle and come to some general understanding. I think what we need to realize is that the battle lines have been drawn. They've been drawn for some time. We were just unwilling to really look at it for what it is, thinking that we could, with our reasoning and our facts, that we could win the other side over. But there isn't going to be any winning over. What I, like you guys, after COVID and the way people reacted and the way people treated us because of personal decisions that we made, we were really shocked by that. These allegations and really mean and nasty things were said, our reputation attacked because of a decision that we made to maintain autonomy over our own body. And it surprised me the ferocity of these attacks from folks that we had long-time friendships with. Some of them, pushing close to 20 years, and how quickly they turned on us, and we became immediately the enemy. And there was all of the things in the past and all the relationships there was no consideration for that. What we realized is that I think what we're dealing with here, beloved, is I think we're dealing with a spiritual separation. Because Mrs. W and I, we sat down and we talked about it, and we tried to figure this out. Can these relationships be repaired? What if they came to us and said, we're sorry we said those things. We were wrong. We see that the facts are coming out now, and actually it was you that made the right decision. And it was wrong for us to drag your reputation in the mud, to attack you publicly, to spread rumors, innuendo, etc. Those apologies have not been forthcoming. Have you received any personally? Those of you who decided to maintain your personal autonomy when it came to the jab, have you heard, have you had the ones that attacked you, co-workers, loved ones, did all manner of evil against you? Have you had them come to you and apologize? Yeah, I haven't either. So what I began to understand, and when I started looking at all of this and looking at these individual people that I was dealing with, one thing that they all had in common is a lack of faith in God. They're atheists, non-believers, agnostic at best. And what Mrs. W and I really came to the conclusion of and came to the agreement of was that there will never be any reconciliation with this, because this is a spiritual separation that God is taking place. God is, through things that we can't completely understand, we're seeing through the glass dimly, God is separating his people, the sheep from the goats. And there's no matter of anything that I think that we can do, or concessions or apologies that are going to repair the damage that's been done, or the rift that's been made between this. And the quicker we come to understanding this, the better I think life is going to be for us. I don't know what that means in the future, but there's for those of you who think that we're going to go back, if we can just get the right guy in office, if we can just if we can win the House, if we can win the Senate, if our guys can get back in, we'll get it sorted out, and we will we'll get an agreement, and we'll get America back on track, and everything's going to be just fine. We've seen the viciousness of the adversary, those that are opposed to our lifestyle, our traditions, our faith, etc., our views on the Second Amendment, whatever you want to call it. We've seen it. Do you think that they are going to have a come to Jesus moment when they are in the camp of the evil one? This is a spiritual battle, beloved. This is a war between... Are we broadcasting? Is this like yesterday? I think we are. Sorry, beloved. When I'm not getting any feedback here, I wonder sometimes what's going on. Hold on, let me double check here. Oh. An audio problem, huh? Yeah. Testing, testing.
Us 16.
Hello? Test, test, test. Did we really have an audio problem? Let's see, Overson's telling me 4 minutes ago. Quick plug check. No audio, huh? Man, I don't know what to do. High voltage mic, huh? Is it working now? Could you guys give me sevens in the comment if the audio is working? Interesting. Yeah, I had audio bars, everything looked clean over here. I don't have any idea with what's going on. Better? I'm waiting to hear from Overton here. You've got a tolerable buzz. Fixed. 100%. Okay. All right, so sorry about that, gentlemen. Sorry about that. I don't know if you guys had any audio. Did you hear anything we were talking about? Boy, it's really frustrating to have these technical issues two days in a row. Yesterday was my fault. I didn't start the stream. I played the intro and didn't start the stream. Did you guys hear anything we were talking about, or should we start over? All right, let me get reset here. Well, okay. Well, the point being is that regarding this no contact, I think at this point, to kind of sum up the opening monologue here, is that this was foretold in prophecy. This came into my mind, and I pulled this up, and I wanted to share it with you. It's somewhat interesting, and it does explain a great many things here. So, one message that the Messiah brought to us, our Messiah, when he came, is he was explaining, he was trying to prepare his 12 disciples the best he could for a very difficult job. He gave them a lot of information. He gave them a lot of knowledge about how to prepare for the future. Now, he only had 3.5 years to start this movement. That's really how long his ministry was, from the time that he was baptized in the desert by John the Baptist to the time that he was crucified was, a little over 3 years or so. And we can see it must have been incredibly frustrating for him trying to, basically feeding these men with a fire hose to prepare them for the very difficult work that would come, a work that would come under great persecution, where 12 men were going to be responsible for changing the world, for getting this message out in a time where there was no internet, there was no phones or anything like that. So this was always on his mind. And one of the most depressing things about the whole thing is the attitude of the disciples on that last day at the Last Supper. When Jesus came in, he realized that they were bickering and they were arguing amongst themselves. Now, they'd been with him. He'd been teaching them for how long? Almost 4 years. You'd think they would have got it, knew what was going on and what the new kingdom was going to be and what his role was going to be. He spoke very clearly to them, pulled them aside, told them. And yet, what were they bickering and arguing about at the final supper? Who's going to be the greatest when Jesus comes into Jerusalem, becomes king, kicks out the Romans? We're going to be set up, man. We're in on the ground floor of this enterprise. Am I going to be Secretary of Defense? Is Judas going to be the Minister of Finance? Is Peter going to be Captain of the Guard, etc., right? All of these things, that's what they were arguing. Which one of us is going to be greatest in these end times? Well, the lesson that he taught them absolutely cut them to the heart. He comes in, right? He comes in and he goes over by the door. By the door, there would have been a washing basin. In that washing basin would have been kept water or a pitcher with water next to it. Now, it was customary in those times, if you had a guest coming over, you would wash their feet. Now, these are people that are traveling. They're walking everywhere they go. Dirt streets, walking through horse manure, mule, you can get the imagine. The streets were dirty back in the day, especially if it was wet and muddy outside. You didn't want to trample all that into your house. So it was a custom that was done at each household, every household. Now, this job of washing a stranger or a family member's feet would have fallen to the least important member of the family. Most likely, if you would have had a slave or a servant, or maybe your children even. But it was very unlikely, and probably would not happen, that the head of a household, the matriarch or the patriarch of the household would have ever stooped to do something like this. It would have been relegated to someone else. So to paint the scene, we've got all of the 12 disciples sitting around, reclining. They're not sitting at a table like the picture showed. They didn't eat that way. They reclined on the floor, the Middle Eastern style. But they're all sitting around, and here their commander comes, the Son of God. And he looks at them, he surveys the scene, he bends down and he picks up the basin, the pitcher of water, girds himself with a towel and walks over and kneels down and starts washing the feet of the disciples. Well, they're just absolutely, 11 of them anywhere, are absolutely mortified. Why would the Son of God lower himself to do this? And the point that he was making to them was, if you're not willing to be the servant, then you're not willing to. Then you're not worthy of being part of the kingdom. And that's what's lost on a lot of these religious leaders these days. The Catholic Church comes to mind with the opulence and the gold and the silver and the wealth and all of the pageantry is very contrary to this lesson right here. Or your TV evangelist preachers with the private jets and the $50,000, $60,000 watches and the fleet of cars. It's contrary to that, unless you're willing to get in there and to do this work. So I'm just trying to paint the scene a little bit of what was going on at the time. So at the end, Jesus is trying to explain to these men what it's going to be in the end times. Now, one thing you have to read when you're reading these texts, there is something, and I forget the term for it, but it's like a duality of meaning. When he talks about something, about fleeing Jerusalem and the final days, it can have oftentimes a dual meaning. It can mean an immediate time that's coming up in the future within the lifespan or lifetime of the individual that's hearing it, and it can have a secondary meaning that's appropriate for what will take place in the end days, which I think that we're in today. So it's just one of the amazing things that happens in the scriptures, these dual meaning prophecies. Because how God teaches a lot of the times and how this thing works is that through examples of history or allegory is a foreshadowing of what we have to look at in the future. One thing that's been coming up a lot, and I think a lot of you who are men of the book, who study like myself and are interested in this, the thing that keeps coming up is, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the end times. Have you come across this? Well, when you come across this, and I've been coming across this a lot, as in the days of Noah, so it will be in the very end times. Well, what was going on in the days of Noah? What is it? What was the problem there? What was taking place? What was it that finally brought God's wrath upon the sins of man? Well, we know the story of the ark and such, and that's a perfect example of one of those dual meanings. The ark that saved Noah and his family through the flood was a form of Christ. Noah didn't swim, his family they didn't save themselves, they got on board. Whoever would have got on board of that ark would have been saved. You know, we know that the entire time that Noah was building and his sons and such, there was an opportunity. Not only was he was preaching a sermon with this build. You know that there was no water, had never been rain on the earth until that time. No one knew what it was. It never existed before. It wasn't even in their reference. We're told from the old books that the crops and everything were watered from the dew and from the water that came up from the ground, underground. And so he's building this gigantic thing that's never been built before, explaining to them that there's going to be a day coming when the heavens shall open up and pour down rain and everything will be flooded. And the only way to escape it is by getting on this boat. What's very similar to the message we have today. There is a judgment coming. Just like there was a flood coming. There's a lot of time given. God is very patient with this. Whole time Noah is building, that was a very powerful sermon. Why is a man dedicating so much time, resources, and effort into this boat? Maybe he has a message. Is he crazy? Or does he know something that we don't know? One thing we do know is that everyone that got on the boat was saved, and everyone who didn't get on the boat was not. Could more have been saved had they got on the boat? I don't know. But we'll close with this here, but the point I wanted to get to, the interesting thing was here that in one of these prophecies about what Christ was, he was warning the disciples in these end days, trying to prepare them for what they had to look forward to, is a shadow, echo into the future to us right here today. And he goes on to say, he says, "Don't suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Now, isn't this gentle Jesus meek and mild? What's he talking about? I thought he was the Prince of Peace. What is he talking about? A sword. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword? What type of a God would do that? Is that the angry, vengeful God that we keep talking about? Well, let's read on. He goes on to say, "A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." Now, this is talking about the final days. It's unthinkable. It was even unthinkable, I think, for my family and many of you before COVID, of longtime family and friends. It would have been unthinkable that these could have become enemies. Enemies in our own home. We saw it. We saw it with the J6ers. We saw examples of children that dropped a dime on their parents because they knew their parents had been in D.C. And there are people sitting in jail for that. Your own flesh and blood from your own house. Can you imagine it? I see routine examples. I saw a couple yesterday of women that have been married to men for a long time. They're slowly have been poisoning them for insurance fraud or just to get them out of the way or because they have another lover somewhere. Enemies in your own house, in your own home. The last place that you would expect danger and harm to come from. Have I shared that old story with you guys about the doe with the one eye? I hate to always repeat these things, but we do have new people coming. The story goes like this. It's a perfect, I guess, allegory as to what we're talking about. There's a doe born with one eye. She can't see out of the other eye. She's in danger. There's hunters around, and she can only see from one side, so she's always constantly worried that the danger is going to come from a side which she can't see. So she comes up with a clever plan. She goes down and she grazes by the seaside. She grazes by the seaside because there is no chance of any threat. There are no natural predators that come from the ocean. Any threat that would come from the land, and she can keep an eye on that, and she's figured it out. No problem with the one eye. Well, a very clever hunter is watching this animal and realizing what she's doing. I know what she's doing. She can't see out of that eye. She's blind. She'll never expect me if I come from the ocean. What does he do? He gets in the boat, paddles over there very silently, and when he's within range, launches an arrow, and it's a kill shot. And in her dying breath, "Oh, hard fate for me that I should receive my death wound from a place which I least expected." The home, right? How was Christ ultimately betrayed and crucified? What brought that about? Well, it was from someone from the inside. It was Judas, betrayed him. So all of these are examples to us, beloved, in the end days. Those of us who are answering the call of God, who are being separated apart from his goats, from the agnostics, from the non-believers. We have to realize that we may have a serpent in our house. We have to realize that there may be someone in our family that we are continuing to try to build relationships with and trying to mend relationships with. This is not going to happen. The gulf is too far. They'll never be able to come to your way of belief because they're not of God. Jesus says, my sheep know me and they answer me. They come to me when I call them because they know my voice. He's calling, but if you don't know his voice, they answer to a different master. And so it's not possible for us to come together. So point being, beloved, don't stop torturing yourself. If you've been beating your head, if you've been kicking against the pricks, as the old book says, with a relationship, and it could be mother, father, sister, brother, could be your own children, could be a lifelong friend, 50 years, that you're just not able to put together. Just realize that there's more going on than just what you can see, that we are engaged in a spiritual battle and the sides are being drawn up. And the more time goes on, the wider this gulf is going to be, and it's okay to let those things go. As hard as that is to do, if you've tried and you've tried and you've tried, and you're no closer to reconciliation, and you can see that they'll never, ever, short of a miracle, come to your way of thinking, then it's time to let them go, beloved. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, I'm not saying that you're not going to love them anymore. And you should certainly pray for them very earnestly. God can change the hearts of anyone. We've seen that. We have the examples. But he may not. And once he has set everything in motion, and it's impossible for things to be changed apart from outright miracles. I'll close with this. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household, Christ tells us. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So he's telling us right there that you're going to have to make a choice. Everyone's going to have to make a choice. And this really cuts to the bone, because we're not talking about cutting off acquaintances, coworkers, friends. We're talking about cutting off children, mothers, fathers, wives, if necessary. He concludes by saying, whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So, that has just been on my mind today. That's something that Mrs. W and I have had to really wrestle with, struggle with, come to an agreement on. Kind of came to an agreement on it this week or so, that we just have to let them go. As much as we have enjoyed those friendships and such, unless there is a serious reformation, we can't serve two masters. We can't serve God and maintain the values that are required of a person of faith, a person of the book, and also serve these people that are antagonistic or at polar opposites of our core values. It's just no longer compatible. And I think it's just a sign of the times, beloved. It's a sign of the times of that separation that I talked about. There's a spiritual battle going on. And what I want you guys to take away from this, what I want my family to take away from this, is it's okay. This is outside of our controls. This is not about us not being forgiving. This is not about us not being loving. It is so far outside of our control. It's just it might be time to circle the wagons and start protecting yourself and your family, and to let these things go. As hard as that is going to be to say. All right. Nothing like a completely disjointed, crazy rant that makes no sense. Standard around here. Let's see if the super chats will get us back online. We have a super chat from Fargo. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much. And good news, we just hit 1,000 members. 1,000 Wranglerstar members, and that is a very exciting number. I'm going to have to cook up something very nice for you guys this weekend. Mrs. Debbie's birthday is tomorrow, so I'll probably won't be tomorrow, but maybe Sunday. We have our friend Stubby is back. Welcome, Stubby. Good to see you back here. Stubby's been with us for 2 months. He says, "Hi, Cody. My wife and I tried your idea of visiting a thrift store for $20. Now, every time I see an old ornate metal candy tin, I think that would be great to put my Ballistol rag in." Yep, I agree with that. I have my Ballistol rag right here. It is one of my top 100 favorite things. Yes, I'm glad to hear that. Mrs. W and I actually did that when we were in Palm Springs. We were, of course, when you're on vacation, you spend a lot of time walking around and looking at shops and all the different things that's going on. And there was, we were in Palm Springs, which is a pretty posh area, and there was a thrift store. And we walked by and we thought, I'll bet there's good stuff in there. All these fancy people bringing their things in. And we did the same thing. We went in and walked around and looked at stuff, and it was fun. That's what we used to do when we were first married. And we didn't have any money to go out and buy dinners or gifts or anything like that. So we would do mystery dates to the local thrift store. We had 2 or 3 picked out that we would kind of rotate through every few months or so, and we would set ourselves a limit. And go in and see what we could find. I was always looking for anything that was wool, anything from like Filson or Woolrich or Pendleton, anything like that. I would just go through there and look. And one of the worst things about when you're hunting for Pendleton shirts, man, have you ever heard of a false peak? Those of you guys who have been mountaineers or done a lot of hiking and climbing, where you're climbing up a mountain and you can see the top, and you look at it and you're thinking, oh, goodness, I'm almost there. I'm dying up here. I can't wait for this to be over. And you come up over the rise just to realize that that was not the peak, but just a bench, and the real peak is way up yonder, further than you could possibly imagine. It just rips your guts out. A false peak when you're thinking that you can't go any further and you're halfway there. Well, the Pendleton shirt, that's exactly what happens at the thrift store. I can pick out a Pendleton shirt from across the room. I know the patterns, and they just have a look about them, right? But I have to wear like a large tall, because I have big, long monkey arms, or I can wear an XL. So I go straight to them, I see them, and I pull them out, I'm like, excellent. And I look at the tag, and there it is, man, large, tall, or extra large, like, man, I got it. And just to throw it on, and it's 2 sizes too small because someone threw it in the dryer and shrunk it all up. Every single one of those shirts in a thrift store, a Pendleton shirt, has been shrunk up and is now an extra small. It's very, very disappointing. Don't throw your Pendleton, well, you can wash them now, the newer ones, but the old ones, don't throw them in the dryer. But shout out to you, Stubby. And the Ballistol rag, what he's talking about is Ballistol is a great, smells good, doesn't it? Is an old school, imagine it's like a WD-40, but it's an oily WD-40, so it sticks around a little bit longer. A lot of guys use it for wiping down gun barrels and such, so they won't rust. Woodworkers use it on the bottom of your planes. Like when you're working with raw steel, like hand planes, for example, there's a lot of oil and salts and chemicals, corrosive elements in your skin that your skin exerts, through sweat and such. Man, you touch that, it'll immediately rust. So I keep this in a tin can so that you can just wipe it down. Wipe it all down right before you go, and that way it lasts forever. You can take your big bottle of Ballistol and you can dump it in there. Saturate that, get yourself a gunsmithing silicone rag, put it in a tin can. Man, that's where it's at. That's where you find something like this. And you should find, when you're looking for your Ballistol can, you want to find the most beautiful ornate thing you can find, kind of like mine. The gaudier, the better. And if it's got rhinestones on it, all the better. Shout out to you, Stubby. I think that's great. I hope you got a good Ballistol can. We have a super chat from the Green Thumb Patriot. Welcome. Good to see you here. He writes, God bless you, sir, for bringing this to light. A lot of Christians don't believe this is the end, the book of Revelations. Yeah, it certainly is, man. And I've read that verse, I've grown up with that verse. And it never really carried any weight with me. I tried to apply it in different ways in the past, but it just really wasn't relevant. It was hard to even understand. I mean, how can, in the final days, would a family not come together, circle the wagon, so to speak, to get through difficult times? Why is it that doesn't seem to be happening? Well, and people of the book are oftentimes the last ones to see these things. We're in a spiritual battle. And if you are trying to maintain your faith, if you're trying to walk in the steps of Christ and you wonder why you don't have any friends or why your friends have abandoned you, why your family's abandoned you, you need to look to that. You need to stop. If you're a jerk and just a disagreeable person, let's not lump that onto prophecy. But if you've tried, made every effort, and still you're just getting no headway, but things are even getting worse, that there's more division in your family, I would look to this as a result. So really the only thing that you can do to affect change in a situation like this, when we're talking about a spiritual battle amongst people or family members, is very earnest and devout prayer. Speaking of which, the middlemen have spoken, and we will be starting our 4 weeks of our 4-week Proho fast this coming Wednesday. So they talked about it, they discussed it, they picked the date, they gave it to me, and so that's what we'll be doing. So if you're wondering what that is, in the past, not in the past, always. This is the way it's always been. Your church hasn't taught you this because it's the Laodicean church and it's still in Babylon. But I'm going to break it down for you and myself here as well. One of the most powerful weapons that we have as armies, as soldiers of Christ, is prayer and fasting. And fasting in particular. Well, why? Why is this important? Does God just want us to suffer? Does he want us to be like the Catholics and crawl upstairs on our knees and whip ourselves with cords and chains and wear hair shirts and that sort of thing? Just arbitrary tests of obedience. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. Fasting is done when you're really in need for something. When you have a very important special request. You have sickness in your family. You've got spiritual apathy. You're praying, you don't feel like your prayers are being heard. You feel like God, like the ceiling is as made of solid brass, and everything that you are trying to send up to the Father just comes back down unheard. I understand that. That's real, and it's a terrible thing. When you find yourself in these situations, or you're just confused, or you've lost your peace, or you don't know what to do, you don't know what decision to make. Should I move? Should I stay? Should I quit my job? Should I start a business? Should I go talk to this person? Should I not? Those are all perfect things and perfect times when you really have a need, is to really rededicate yourself to the cause of prayer, and that is a good way to do that is through fasting. Now, there's no set time. I'm going to lay out a time there. You can follow along. You cannot. You can amend it to what works for you. If you have medical conditions and you can only miss one meal, whatever. No one's judging here. It's not about that. But what I'm going to be doing, and what many of the middlemen will be doing, and many of you are going to be doing coming this Sunday, is when we wake up, drink water, but don't eat any food. So when you wake up, how you properly start a fast is you get some oil. My family always used olive oil for this, anointing oil, as it's called. Anointing oil is common in the Old Testament, in the old books. The anointing oil was used for like a priest to anoint the new king. It was symbolic of the covering of the receiving of the Holy Spirit, of the Spirit of God coming into one. So it's symbolic of that. So what you do, and the instruction is very clear, Christ laid it out, when you fast, take some oil and put it upon your head before you start. This is symbolic of the receiving of the Holy Ghost. Wipe it off. You need not let anyone know what you're doing. If you want to share it with your family members, and I would recommend you do that, because it'll cause, if you've never done this before and all of a sudden you're just not eating and skipping meals, I think it worries our family sometimes. So I think you should go to your wife and children and say, I'm doing this. So if I don't, I will sit down with you to eat, but I'm not going to be partaking. Just so they understand it. Make sure everyone's on the same page. And maybe they want to join you. You never know. So do that. Do it privately. Inform your family if you need to. And then I would recommend that you drink water throughout the day. There's no reason not to drink water. That's certainly in the spirit of it. You need to do that. If you choose not to, that's your choice as well. But most of us are going to do that. And I would recommend you either miss 3 meals, choose a 12-hour fast, or you can do a 24-hour, whatever you think. I'm going to do a 24-hour, and we're going to do this for 4 days, every Wednesday for a month, right? So that's what we're going to do. In that time, and we can talk about this. I think we have several days to talk about this, but I think that you guys should be putting in the comments. The big picture item is that us as a collective here of soldiers of Christ, if we could corporately be on the page for something, I think that would move some mountains. That'd be important. So I know we all have individual issues that we're dealing with right now, and concerns and needs, and there's no reason why you can't piggyback those on top of the big picture, but it would be nice for us to kind of come together as a collective of what is it that we're trying to do here, where do we need guidance right now as to what should that be corporately as the group, the big picture item. So put your requests in there. The middlemen are watching and kind of keeping track of that. Overton kind of distills that down to me and gives me the general consensus or the feel of the group, from the Big Fizz group to the middlemen to all of you who are members, etc. So that's coming up Wednesday. So prepare yourself for that, and I will be doing it. I'll be doing it right along with you. Our friend Dr. Prepper, welcome, Doctor, is in the comments. He says, have you put much thought or prep into EMP-resistant vehicles, farm work equipment? Imagine having a truck, chainsaw, tractor could go a long ways. Yeah, Mrs. W and I have been talking. She's been reading all these prepper books, and she's been getting after me on a couple, has been pointing out some of the holes that I have around here. And one thing that we have been talking about is having a vehicle. What he's talking about, what Dr. Prepper's talking about, I guess preface this really quickly, is that we have been told that there, in the event of an atomic weapon going off, or there may even be dedicated weapons that can be unleashed in the atmosphere or the stratosphere, whatever it is, that can essentially fry all electronics. I think most of us here are very familiar with this concept. An EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. Now, I went round and round with a lot of different people trying to get information on this, and it's hard really to get true. Some people will say, well, if you put your stuff in a Faraday cage of such and such thickness and such material, it will protect it. And there's a lot of dudes doing that. There's a lot of people that have taken electronic ignitions for critical tools. Let's say you have a brand new steel chainsaw. Let's say you have a 461, right? It's got an electronic module in it that is all solid state electronic circuit boards and stuff. Now this is vulnerable to that. If that's fried, that saw is not going to start. It's not mechanical. It's going to have a problem. It's not going to work. It's just basically a junk. So critical tools like that, it would be a good idea to have those shielded. So will they be shielded if you have a metal building? That's been my question. I have metal buildings with big ground rods in the ground. Would that do it? How close do you have to be away from something? All these things are just unknown. And man, you can get to the point where you're trying to build defenses, or you're trying to prep for every possible situation, that it becomes very, well, impossible, really. But with that being said, what's going to be critical? Let's say we talk about the 3 things that every proho needs to really focus on. What's number 1? you got to deal with exposure. We can strip away all of the technology that we enjoy. We can strip away all of the busyness that we do, the hobbies, all of the things. We can strip, all of that can be taken away from us it's overnight, in the twinkling of an eye. And it's not going to affect how you live and your health, really. Yes, it's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be convenient. Actually, if those things were taken away, and the fact that you had to get out in the dirt a little bit and be hands-on with providing for your family, I think that just the opposite would happen. I think that health would be increased. Vigorousness would be increased. A lot of problems would go away. Depression, et cetera, et cetera. You know where I'm going with this. But really, we really boil it down to three things that we need. We have to deal with exposure. How are we going to deal with winter, cold, and all that, right? Most of us have that dealt with. Most of us here are not out living underneath of a bench. After that, water. After that, fuel for energy. How are you going to cook with? Heat, that sort of thing. So once those, let's say you have those established. Let's say you've got 10 cords on the ground. Let's say you've got a good well with a backup hand pump, etc. Let's say you've bought My Patriot supply of food, and you've got 3 months, 6 months, a year of freeze-dried food for your family. You're sitting pretty good. Water filtration. Got some ammo, got a few things. Blankets. If I were going to take this to the next logical step, what would be the fourth pillar of success to go forward once these things are established? It would be some sort of a utility vehicle that you can travel, obviously. Right? Some people might say communications are more important than that. You could make that argument, but I would say that some sort of a vehicle that is an EMP-proof vehicle. What is that? What would that look like? Well, that would look like anything that's old from probably pre-70s or so. Maybe, right around in the early 70s, mid 70s is when the electronic ignitions came in, that we got away from the condenser and points. But even then, back then, is the condenser and such, that we still had a coil in those vehicles. I think really to be EMP proof and safe, you'd have to go back to Magneto. What's that, Model A? So that's getting back there. One of the most popular vehicles, and why you can't get deals on them, are the old Cummins diesels and the old Dodge pickups. The first gen, when they first started putting those Cummins in. Because they have, I always say it wrong, is it a 24 valve, 12 valve, whatever. The simple ones. Well, those and even some I guess with a few conversions, even on those late model vehicles, I think it's mainly in the fuel pump system. You can go to a manual fuel pump, but you can make those vehicles completely non-digital, analog, so that they're not relying upon any electronics. Now, will your radio in the truck work? Will your heater, circuit board? Probably not. But I know friends that are doing that are having completely EMP-proof vehicles, and that would be very, very important. But then again, it's still, if we're talking about a situation where things are that bad, now you're no longer producing fuel. So even that is a temporary fix, unless you are one of the very few people that has 50,000 gallons of diesel stored in an underground tank. And I don't know how long that's even going to last. And that's to say if it doesn't get contaminated. So again, you may have an EMP-proof vehicle, but you're also that's going to be limited on the amount of fuel you have on hand. I know, wood gasification, that is always an option as well, but that's not an option for the masses. That's an option for a tinkerer that's his hobby. That's what he does. He likes to do. But that's not something that you're going to do without a very particular skill set and have already thought about it beforehand. So, yeah, I don't know. Do I have it? I don't know that I even have an EMP. My EMP-proof vehicles are bikes, basically. And we talked about that. What would I do? Let's say that we're isolated here, and it's the valley here, and everyone has to work together, the community, to get by on what they have. Well, there's a bunch of old vehicles here. There's a bunch of old loggers with old equipment. Basically, the main focus would be, the majority of everyone's time would be spent doing three things: pulling security for the community, and that is easy to do here. It's positioned in a way that's easy to defend. Number two would be providing fuel, in some way, energy for the community. And with millions of acres just right across the way of the King's Forest that will no longer be the King's Forest, that is an unlimited supply. All that can be brought down. It's going to do two things. It's going to heat every home in the valley, and it's going to provide the ability for them to cook food as well. Modifications will be done to wood stoves, etc. Those things will come back in. I was very interested to find out also, just in my particular case, just another little feather in the cap, that this area used to run its own hydroelectric because of the way we're situated, and that all of the dairies and all of the businesses all received free energy for years and years off of hydroelectric, micro. It's not really micro when it's feeding the whole community. And then my neighbor's the water master. I've been helping him with the head gates and such. You know, he's in charge of that, and he's getting older. And so Jack and I and Jariah have been going up there and kind of helping him out with that. And I've been learning about this a lot. But he showed me right the spot. Yeah, right here was where the hydroelectric turbine was, and that powered the whole valley. We didn't have any requirements. We didn't need any inputs from outside whatsoever. You know, that's pretty astonishing. But things like that will take place. There's a lot of really intelligent engineer type guys, you know, put that stuff together. And if it was done 50 years ago, it could certainly be done again. Fun fact, what I found out was, my question is, well, why did they take it out? That seems like that was the best deal ever. Free electricity for the community. Instead of buying it from a public municipality. Well, what happened was how I understand it, there was high water. There was a high water event that took out the head gates. They needed to be replaced. It was going to cost a lot of money. Someone recommended, rather than drawing from the funds inside the community to rebuild it, refix it, that we would apply for federal grants, federal money. And they came with the money, no question about it, to rebuild this, but with one condition. We will give you the money, but you will have to decommission the turbine and connect to the grid. That's how they get you, right? They get you. That's how they got all of the Laodicean churches with the 501c, whatever it is, the tax exempt status, that they all suckle off that nipple. And when you take the money, then you're subject to the rules. When you become dependent upon that money, then you are no longer can be objective. And that now you have to make a decision as a pastor. I'm either going to follow the decree of the state, or I'm going to follow the decree of the Almighty. And what did we see during COVID? We saw a bunch of limp-wristed, milquetoast, effeminate pastors that knuckled under because they didn't want to cross the state. And the deeds were written down in the book of life. We all saw it too. That's why so many of us are here that have left those things that we maybe even grew up in. We were so disgusted by the cowardice and weakness and lack of character and faith of these so-called leaders that we can't even look at them anymore. We've lost respect for them, and rightfully so. We have a super chat from Tango165. Welcome, Tango. And a new member, Mr. Brian Hazard, our newest member. Welcome, Brian. Member 1003, at or near. Good to have you here. Thank you. We have Tango writes, thank you for all your hard work with the content. It's greatly appreciated. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Tango. Thank you for your time and for hanging out with us. That's the best part. We have a new member, Farm Boy. Farm Boy's been with us for 2 months. Shout out to Farm Boy. And Paleo52, a brand new member, says, what do you know about Arrow Precision Rifles? I know it's a good company. I think it's right up there with the top tier. If we're talking about Arrow, the same Arrow that I think of up there in Washington. Yeah, actually, I will be doing the next installment, by the way, for members of, we're doing a build using Arrow lowers. And so what are we going to do next? Put the grip on and maybe do the trigger. We got to do that. So I need to get back on that. They're great. They're components. I don't own one personally. The first things that I have purchased from Arrow were the 2 lower receivers I bought from them, buffer tubes, some small parts and such. But my neighbor and fellow warband member, he has built all of his, I think, his last 3 anyway, of his carbines and rifles with Arrow components. And what he did is he buys, there are some deals. If you go on their site, he was telling me that they have scratch and dent, where usually it's coatings problems and you can buy things. I think he was buying lowers for like $60. So, but I think they're great. It's a good company. What I've seen from my small sample has been top of the line, really nice stuff. We have a super chat from Michigan man Cliff. He's been with us for a month. Shout out to you, welcome. He says, I have a lot of experience fasting. Very excited to do it with Proho. I appreciate that. Yeah, me too. A tip, make sure to eat a nutritious real food the day before the fast and ensure hydration makes a huge difference. Yeah, that's a very good point from the Michigan man. Now here we have Michigan man who's redeeming himself. Michigan has taken some hits of late to their West Coast, or potential, their application for West Coast status. It has not been going well for them because of the things aforementioned, primarily the deer tick problem. Yes, the day before, talking about nutrition, I really realized this week how toxic and poisonous sugar is, or the excess of sugar. Now, I'm not going to be one of those diet gurus telling you that you need to eat wheatgrass and seaweed. Let's have some common sense here. But in the time leading up to our trip going to Palm Springs, I had, quite some time, probably since I really quit drinking alcohol, have really eaten probably the best I've eaten in my life as far as the cleanest food. Very, very few processed foods. Mrs. W makes most things from scratch, from quality ingredients. Yes, we'll have the occasional Oreo. We don't buy them. Occasional, whatever. You go to a birthday party, they have one of those crappy cakes from Albertsons, you're going to eat it, right? Just to be polite. Small, but but all that stuff. I just don't eat that so much anymore. I don't drink sodas, sports drinks, energy drinks anymore. My vice is a cup of coffee in the morning, but I drink water or I drink kombucha. So, it's not crazy or anything, but Mrs. W controls the food. She wants to have me around for a while, so she makes sure that, that's the way we do it. Well, of course, when you go on vacation, one of the great things about vacation is all of those restrictions are maybe I'm the only one that does this, but I kind of look at it that way, is that, the mice are away, right? When we're on vacation, we're going to eat cheesecake, and we're going to eat anything we want, and candy and cookies and all that stuff, and which I did. I certainly did. I told you I gained 12 pounds in 5 days. Well, yesterday, I was getting back into I'm back into 2 weeks of my Wim Hof program. Took my cold shower, did my breathing. I was doing my Wim Hof breathing, and I'd gotten quite flexible. I've never been a flexible person, actually, usually quite a bit less flexible than most people. I think most men are that way. I don't know why, it's just the way we are. But I was able to kind of sit Indian style, and I was getting more and more quite flexible compared to what I used to be before. After 5 days of eating all that sugar, I've heard that it's inflammatory. There's there's inflammation that it causes and such. I don't know all these things, but you get to the point when it comes to diet, you just quit listening, because everyone, either they're grifting and they're trying to sell you something, or they're the government and they're trying to make you sick and die early, or be dependent on the medical system, or they're just ignorant, or who knows what. But it's hard to even figure out who's telling the truth anymore. So you just get to the point where you're like, well, I'll just listen to what my body likes, and if something doesn't agree with me, then I won't eat that. I think that's really our diet plan. Proho, if he needs to go on a diet, if he starts getting fat, he just goes down to one meal. That's what we do here. we keep it simple, right? So I try to keep things simple. But one thing I did notice is that all that flexibility that I enjoyed and gained from lots of hard work over the last couple months was almost went away because, and I think it was all that sugar. I think that there's so much inflammation in the body and the muscles from that. I found myself almost back to square one. And I don't know if it's inflammation in the joints or what it is, but I think it's the sugar, to be honest with you. I really think it's the sugar. But to build on what Michigan man was talking about, that's true. So Tuesday, next Tuesday, be deliberate. You know, try to drink, beloved, try to drink 2 quarts of water a day. I know it's hard. It's very difficult. I just poured it out all over my bare feet here. I'm staying grounded. One thing that helps for me is to get 2 containers, fill them up, and you know you can kind of control what you have, and drink 2 of those a day. Why is that important? You know, I think that really for men, you know, one thing that those of us men have a lot of problems with they tell us high blood pressure and with heart disease and heart attacks, and that's all true, no question about it. But if we're just going to be logical and look at the body as a machine, like it is, with pumps and plumbing and circulation and stuff, does it stand to reason if you are running a diaphragm pump for on some machine somewhere, that if you're trying to push thick, heavy oil all the time, the thing's running 24 hours with a tremendous load, a lot of pressure on that pump, versus something that's a lot thinner, you know, 10 weight versus a 90 weight, right? How long is that pump going to last? You know, this is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but that's the way Proho needs to look at things. He's got so many things on his plate, such a tremendous skill set that we just can't contain it all, right? So we have to keep things simple. But I think really the crux of it is the 2 things: carrying away toxins. You know, your bloodstream is able to move toxins, but I wonder that just keeping water in your system. And if you're thirsty, you're already behind the 8 ball. You should take it in throughout the day just to keep your blood thinned, just so your heart is not working as hard to move things, any toxins that you've ingested out of your body. There's just a lot to it, but I think part of the if you're doing the cold showers with me and you're doing the Wim Hof and such, I think the key component to that, really the 3rd pillar of that, is that water consumption. I know it's not. We're tired of hearing about it. We've been hearing about it forever, but no one does it. I know no one does it because I struggle with it. I know how hard it is to do. It's hard to add something like that into your life when you're just out and about and you're going and all this stuff going on, but I think it's important. So that Tuesday, before our fast starts next week, have some good nutrition. That's what I'm saying. Maybe try to cut back on the sugars. Make sure that you increase your amount of water beforehand. Eat high protein, nutrient-dense food. Have yourself a nice big steak and potato the night before, and that can definitely help carry you through. It's actually, I've done a week-long fast. The 1-day fast is actually worse. It's worse than a 3 or 4 day fast or a 5 or 7 day fast. I've done up to 7 days before, and if you talk to people that have done this, many people will say the same thing, that on the 3rd or 4th day, you almost reach a place of higher consciousness where you are above everything. You have a tranquil feeling of calmness. You're not easily agitated. You're not easily angered. And the food is no longer, or the hunger pains are no longer all that intense. I've experienced that personally. So the 1 day is actually worse. We have a member message from Rick Gates. He's been with us for 3 years. Mr. Gates is an OG member. Welcome. Happy Good Friday to everyone. Indeed. Indeed. I have a good friend of my moto buddies who's Jewish, his family and his children. And we sent a meal out, or sent him a text out to him, I think it was yesterday, if he was going to do anything for the Passover, and I haven't heard back from him, but maybe we'll go do a Cedar event or something with them. His son's got a bar mitzvah coming up, and that'll be I think that'll be my first time I've ever been invited to one, so that'll be interesting. We have a super chat or member message, new member, Clifton Craddock. Welcome, Clifton. Welcome. We are very happy to have you here. Welcome. And a member message from Kirk Wagner. Mr. Wagner has been with us for 51 months. Shout out to you. Goodness, that is a long time. Thank you, Clifton. Thank you very much. Clifton. Thank you, Kirk. Mr. Wagner. Thank you very much. 51 months. He writes, we only closed our church for about 6 weeks when we learned more. We told them they could forget it and open the door. Not one caught it from the church. Yeah, and there's no problem with that. There was an overreaction by all of us. I think that's important to get out there before we start casting too many stones here. We were trying to get information. We were fed a lot of propaganda. We were told it was going to be only 2 weeks, the whole thing. And it only made sense. We were arguing this from hindsight, obviously. I'm not talking about that. And 6 weeks is about right. The 2 weeks went by. People are starting to think, wait a minute, And they said, well, just another week or two. But if 6 weeks, I think most of us realized that this was maybe not as bad as they were leading us to believe, and churches reopened. Yep, good for you guys. Not all did that. I think most did not. Most did not. Yeah, these poor pastors that were that wanted to open up were so henpicked by these over-enthusiastic women in the congregation that they gave them no peace. Imagine if the truth was known. We have a super chat from Mr. David Max and brand new member. Welcome, David. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Thank you so much. He says, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. You are very, very welcome. Very, very welcome. Boy, I'm looking forward to this weekend. Friday is my favorite day. Mrs. W has a birthday tomorrow. Any ideas? It's kind of weird. On my birthday, we were traveling, and then it's really difficult with our women. These expectations are truly one of the worst things in life. It's one of the most challenging parts of a relationship, because I can say that, last weekend, we took a trip and we ate out and had all these nice meals and we got her a new dress and had a great time. Went to a nice place and such. And as we talked about it, like, okay, well, we'll just roll your birthday and my birthday and the anniversary all into one, and this will just be the whole celebration, and we'll just be done with it, right? And everything will be simple. And she even said that, right? But I know, as much of a saint as Mrs. W is, that if there is not some effort put in to the birthday festivities tomorrow, that, well, you guys know. You guys know. So here's what I'm going to have to, the Sweet Loaf and I are going to have to be doing some baking tonight. So maybe a cake or cupcakes. We'll decorate the house. We'll just go full bore, do all that with the banners in the window, in the balloons. Maybe I should order some flowers, and take her out to breakfast. Do you think that's sufficient? Do I need to go back down into town and get another? I don't know. But I think I haven't quite got women completely figured out, because they tell you one thing. But then you find out that if you follow the letter of that, sometimes you wished you hadn't. So I think it's more about the effort than actual what's going on. But pray for me, beloved, that I don't mess this up. All right. Well, goodness. Well, I think that's probably it. I have a lot of stuff I've got to do this afternoon. I've got some stuff I want to put out for you members I've been excited about, and I guess that's about it. That's about it. Look forward to the Sabbath coming. It's really the best day of the week. One thing that we kind of enjoy is to kind of shut things down a little bit early. And I would encourage you, I always do this. This is my custom. It's my channel. It's my live stream, so I can do whatever I want. So if you don't like it, too bad. What you're hearing here is good for you, if you like it or not. I really encourage you, though, beloved, to, if you're agnostic, you follow, believe a different faith, to keep the Sabbath day. Keep the Sabbath day. The fourth commandment is the only one that starts with remember. Remember the Sabbath day. Why? Because God knew we would forget it. The day has been changed. We, as Protestants, and the Catholic Church marvels at this, they changed the day of worship as a sign of their authority, of being the mother church, of the day of worship that God set aside in the fourth commandment, in the Ten Commandments, as the seventh day of the week, which most of us think is Sunday. It's not. Sunday is the first day of the week. Go look at your calendar. Saturday is the seventh day of the week. The Jews have never lost track of this. Our Jewish friends have kept the Sabbath for millennia. Right? They know. They're very specific about this. They're very specific about the day. They're very specific about genealogies. You know, we know how they are. They're the longest running unbroken tribe of people, uninterrupted tribe of people that there is, as far as I understand. So that's not up for debate, what the day is. We know what the day is. The curious part, and what makes the Catholic Church constantly laugh at us, is that us saying that we're Protestants, we're protesting from the days of Martin Luther, we're protesting the corruption and heresy of the Catholic Church as Protestants, of iconology is a big issue, Mary worship is a big issue, and the priest class being an intermediary between us and Christ. That's really, if you're wondering what the big hubbub is and the big to-do is with our Catholic friends and us that are Protestants, that's the main issue. What the Catholic Church has done is basically said that we will put a priest, a middleman, between you and God, so that you come to him and then he'll take your prayers to God. You don't go directly. That's why they tried to keep us in the dark for so long by keeping the books in Latin. They weren't available for the common people, where they and they alone held the truth, and they could basically dictate to the poor masses of how things would be. But, you know, we know different now. So the Catholic Church laughs at us, Protestants, that continue to worship on Saturday under the flimsy pretense of it's the Lord's Day, of a context, in my belief, that's taken out of context, to justify Sunday worship, which is contrary to the Ten Commandments. And they say, well, we're no longer under the law. Christ came to fulfill, and he did away with all of that. Well, which of the other commandments did he do away with? The first one? Second, third, fifth, sixth, eighth, ninth, 10th? Well, none of them, you say. Only the fourth one. Oh, okay. So he only did away with the fourth one that starts with the word remember. What do you think about that? It's important. What was done away with was not the day of worship. What was done away with was Christ was the fulfilling of the sacrificial system, of the system of sacrificing animals and all of those things that were foreshadowing of the ultimate sacrifice, which was the Lamb of God. Jesus called himself, I am the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. All of the sacrificing of the lambs, of the goats, of the oxen, the bullocks, all of that in the past, the doves, was symbolic of the ultimate sacrifice that was coming, which was the Son of God himself. Those people, you have to remember, those people knew that God was providing a sacrifice for us, that the wages of sin are death. Someone's got to pay those wages. There are laws in the universe. Dark and light can't coexist. Good and evil can't coexist. Sin and righteousness cannot exist. So we can't do it ourselves. We're marred in this world, right? He told those people back in the day, I'm going to be sending a Messiah down the future. He's even going to come from this group of people. Gave them everything they needed to know. But in that time, in those thousands of years, people were dying in their sins without access to the Messiah because he hadn't come yet. So there needed to be an avenue, there needed to be a way, a method for these people to receive forgiveness. And these animals, this blood sacrifice, stood in proxy as a temporary fix to point to, symbolically point to the true sacrifice, which was the Lamb of God. So what was done away with, beloved, by him coming was not the destruction or making the Ten Commandments irrelevant. Again, no one's going to be saved by keeping the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are a mirror to us. A mirror. When we look at them, it is a mirror that reflects all of the filth and sin upon us. When we contrast our life, when we start reading down those, do we follow those all? All of us will be convicted and know that we're guilty of at least one of these. And what's God tell us? If you're guilty of one, you're guilty of all of them. So that puts us in a very precarious situation. That's not saving us. That's making us aware of our standing. That's painting a contrast of us, our filthy lives, contrasting it to what a righteous life looks like. That's all that is. So let's be clear on that. But they have not been done away with. They're there and will always be there. They'll probably be in the museum in the kingdom. We can look back and see them. They're immutable. They're eternal. That's why God wrote them on stone with his very own hand. What was done away with, and what, in my opinion, so many Protestant Christians believe are justifying changing the day of worship, what they're missing is what was done away with was that sacrificial system. That's why the moment that Christ gave up the ghost on the cross, something happened inside of the temple. What happened? Well, the curtain was torn by unseen hands from top to bottom. Exposing what? Exposing the Ark of the Covenant. Well, why is that important? Well, in the sacrificial system, the Ark of the Covenant was in the inner chamber inside the temple. And that was to be seen and administered only once a year, and that by one person, and that was the chief priest. And he was to come there and to bring all of the sacrifices, the symbolic sacrifices that had been forgiven, or had been, the responsibility had been taken in the shedding of blood of all these animals for the whole people. He was to bring them before God as an offering to him to receive forgiveness for all of the people corporately. Because that's how it was been done before Christ ultimately came and did it. This was a foreshadowing of him. No one was to see that. Even the chief priest had to go through an extremely rigorous set of rituals to purify himself, and wore very specific garments. And they even tied a rope onto his ankle, and they, on the hem of his garment, laced it with bells in the shape of pomegranates. All this, you can read this all in the Old Testament, how God laid this out. Because if he were to have walked into that place of the Ark of the Covenant, and in the presence of the Shekinah glory, the presence of God, who actually dwelt for a time between the two cherubim in the lid, or the mercy seat as it's called, if he had done things right and not followed the procedures to the T, he would have been consumed and destroyed by the glory of God. And those men that were in the antechamber there were not about to be going in there and fetching him out after what had happened. So the bells, they could hear the bells jingling and tinkling. They knew that he was in there moving around ministering, doing the priestly work. He wasn't dead yet. And the rope around his ankle was to yard him out if indeed he had went in there unconsecrated. This was a very serious thing, and had been done for a long, long time. Had been done in the tabernacle back in the day before the Temple of Solomon was built, and then ultimately moved into God's temple that Solomon built. And the same thing, just on a larger scale. So the symbolic thing, the thing that I'm getting at here is that there was a massive woven tapestry or fabric, curtain, that protected, that separated this room from the Ark of the Covenant. When Jesus gave up the ghost on the cross, that garment, that fabric, curtain, divider was torn with unseen hands, rent in half, exposing what? Exposing what was not to be seen, which was the Ark of the Covenant. That was symbolic of the rending or the tearing away of that old sacrificial system to be replaced by the new system. Jesus said, I have come to fulfill, not to destroy, not to change. I've come to fulfill. He fulfilled that. No longer will there be animal sacrifices. I, Christ, I'm speaking, I made the ultimate sacrifice. I am the Lamb of God. Now that has been done for you. You need only to claim what I have done for you, to accept me into your hearts, and I will start changing you. That's how you're saved. You need to go back, as were the days of Noah, to tie this all together. You need only to get on the boat. You get on the boat and you are saved. You accept the blood of Christ, you are saved, completely independent of anything you've done yourself. So to try to explain it to you, what was fulfilled at the end time, it wasn't to change the day of worship, it wasn't to change the fourth commandment and remain. If the fourth commandment was to be changed, would there not something so significant as that, would there not be references or mentions of that? So this will anger a lot of people. It always does. It's very, very controversial. Many of you are hearing this thinking that I'm a heretic. Some of you will accept it. Some of you know it to be truth, but you're unwilling to claim it because that would mean you would have to give up friends, pastors, church memberships, and it's just asking too much to do. I get it. Some of you may come to this realization and be in a really tough spot knowing that God doesn't want me to work on the Sabbath, yet my job requires me to do this. What am I going to do? You're not the first one that struggled with this. I'm not going to tell you. I just brought you what you might be considering the bad news. Some people will consider it the good news, but it's just the truth. God's people need to keep the Sabbath and the right day. It's not just any other day. If you think that it doesn't make any difference to God what day you keep, whether it be the seventh day of the week or the first day of the week, just miss your anniversary and tell her 3 days later, next day, say, well, just say the next day, I decided that we're going to celebrate anniversary today. See how that works out for you. Dates and times, they mean things. They matter. They matter to us. They matter to God. That's why we have timelines. That's why we have prophecy. And it's important, beloved. It's important. All right. Shall we wrap it up? So we have a couple more messages. We have our friend, Mr. Tony Bologna, and brand new moderator. Welcome. I made you a moderator, Tony, this morning. You can thank Overton for that. He has a comment, take over the house chores for the day and foot rub. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea, Tony. That would mean making breakfast. I can definitely take her out, knock out the last two meals, so that gets me off the hook. And every pro-host should be able to make a good breakfast. I think it's a good foot massage. We don't do foot massages, but I guess we could always start. Oh, there are other ways, right? Thanks for the idea. And Mr. Dr. Prepper says, what if you have work medical on the Sabbath? Now, that is a different situation. Christ spoke to that. I'll touch on that. I was about to go there because it is important. There's critical infrastructure that needs to keep running. Let's say, what if you work at a nuclear power plant? What if you are a doctor on call in an emergency room? Is there wiggle room on this? Christ addressed this when he healed the man with a withered hand on the Sabbath day. To set the scene, it was early in his ministry. There were people crowding around, filling this little house, just splitting the seams. And word had gotten out that there was an incredible healer in the midst. And so everybody with sick family members, friends were coming from miles around to bring them on. Some of them were carrying them on litters to bring them to this great healer. And there were also in this crowd a lot of spies from Jerusalem, from the priesthood, from the class that were concerned about, who is this man? Is he going to cause trouble? Now the priesthood was very concerned about Christ's ministry, not necessarily because of what he was saying at first, but they were concerned that he was going to bring heat on them from the Romans. Now what the Romans now at that time in Jerusalem, they were in charge. They had conquered the Israelites, and the Roman style of leadership was a little bit different than some barbarians in the past, where they would come in, if they came into a place that had a functioning government, rather than tear it all down, raze it to the ground, and destroy everything, they would leave it intact and basically say, okay, here's how it's going to be. We're going to bring in our guy. He's ultimately going to be in charge of the place, but we'll let you run your affairs. And so that's what they did. You will pay us tribute, pay us taxes. Long as we get our tax money, it keeps flowing. Long as you don't rebel and cause problems, we don't have to send the legions down here, then you can go along as you always have. You're just going to be paying more taxes to Rome. Well, the Israelites, they hated this. It was terrible. And even though the priesthood, which was in their economy back then, the central government and the priest class, there was no separation. It was one, basically. So the chief priest was not only the head pastor, but he was also the president, essentially. So they let him maintain his power. They stripped him of some powers. He didn't have the ability to drop edicts for capital punishment or put people to death. That ultimately had to come from the Roman authority. But they were able to operate in their day-to-day affairs. They kept themselves in their lavish comfort and had their authority and everything from that, so everything was going along just fine. I think, if I had to guess, the church leaders of the day were more concerned about losing their status or getting the heat of Rome on them and getting thrown out than they were about the salvation of the people. So their main concern when they heard that this influential teacher was running about, this Yeshua, this Jesus, stirring up the people, they were sending spies as well. They wanted to hear back. What's he saying? What's going on? Do we need to put an end to this, or is it going to amount to nothing? So Jesus there were many people, different sorts of people around him with varying motivations, right? So it's the Sabbath, and the Jews are all about the Sabbath, man. They got so many rules. They've even taken the rules that God has laid out by not doing work, and they've added on them 100-fold. You may only walk so many steps. You may not cook. You may not start a fire. They just piling them up until the point where the Sabbath became a burden upon people. They couldn't do anything. They were basically trapped in their homes or in their communities for 24 hours. So it was just the opposite of what God designed it to be, a blessing. It had turned into a burden. So the Sabbath comes. Everyone's watching. Sick man comes in here. I think he had a withered hand. And the Pharisees, the church leaders, are watching. Is he gonna break the Sabbath? Is he gonna do something that's not allowed on the Sabbath by healing? We'll have him. We'll report back to the priest. We'll have him. He's a Sabbath breaker. He's only fit for prison or worse. Well, he knew them. He had an incredible ability. I don't know if it was the ability to read thoughts or what it was, but he knew what they were thinking. There's many examples of that. And they're sitting watching him. He looks at them and he asks them a question. So which one of you, and I'm paraphrasing here, I get things mixed up. But the point is, which one of you, he looks in there, that if his livestock, his goat, his cow, fell into a pit, they dug pits in those days to catch lions. There was pits all over the place. Which one of you, that if your prized animal falls in a pit on the Sabbath day, would not go out there straight away, lay hands on it, and pull it up, rescue this beast out of the pit? Well, all of them knew there was an exception for that. All of them knew, well, of course they would do that, because that would touch on my finances. You start to see what was really behind the Sabbath keeping and these rules. Well, they would put burdensome rules on men and women, arbitrary nonsense, but the moment it affected anyone's ability to make profits or hit their bottom line in any way, well, we'll make sure, of course you would go down there, lay hands on an animal, pull it up out of the ditch, or lest it die down there and you'd be out at a great financial loss. Right? You got to read between the lines on this. You can get a feel for the politics of the time. So right there, Jesus, with him admitting it, he had to think in his mind, I got him there. He says, well, how about that? Well, how much more appropriate would it be to heal someone? Not only to heal, but to heal one of God's own children on the Sabbath. If you're willing to pull an animal to rescue an animal on the Sabbath, would it not be appropriate to heal someone that's hurting or suffering from a great sickness on the Sabbath? Well, he couldn't really say too much about that. He reached out and he healed the man's hand and he became whole again. And that's when the plotting really started against him, when they took that message back that he is a Sabbath breaker. So he goes on to say, do you not know that the Sabbath was made for man? Man was not made for the Sabbath. This was made to be a blessing to people. So the point I'm making, to speak to Dr. Prepper's comment, is that, I don't think it's appropriate to empty out the hospitals on the Sabbath day. People are going to be suffering from heart attacks. Babies are going to be born. There's going to be car wrecks. No, it's okay. It's okay to do good on the Sabbath. It's okay to pull an animal out of distress in a well. It's okay to bring comfort to someone that's suffering. Now, with that being said, as a person of faith, if you're working in an organization, you're one of the few, is there an obligation for you to not schedule your work on that day, if possible? Is it possible for you, without losing your job, to have someone else cover that shift and you work other times? That I don't know. But it's something to think about. It's something to think about. Yeah, I don't know. It's God left it pretty loose. He left it pretty loose. There aren't a lot of, the Jews are very rigid about it. They have, I think every prominent rabbi that's come on the scene has wanted to add his stamp of authority by putting another rule on it. Pretty soon you have a whole book, and who couldn't even know what's permitted and what's not permitted. But God didn't do that. He kept it very vague. Don't do any work, your maidservant, your manservant, nor the servant at your gate, or the stranger at your gate, nor your animals. So I think he left it vague for a very specific reason, in that all of our lives are very different, and our situations are very different. And that's one thing. It's been a really important, I'll close with this, a really important lesson to me as someone who was very black and white and rigid. And I've tried to really get down to the bottom of that. I see things so clearly to me. And I'm around other people and they don't see things so clearly. They're more nuanced. Mrs. W is more nuanced at seating. Well, I will make a statement, this is the way it is, or we should be doing thus and so. She will almost always acknowledge this, but also preface it with a different perspective, or maybe the perspective of the person that I may think is in the wrong. And I used to get frustrated at this. Like, goodness, it's so clear. it's so clear. Why does she not see it? But I think it's more loving. It's a balancing act, man. I mean, we want to have standards, beloved. We want to stick to what we know to be right. There's right and wrong. There's male and female. Let's not blur the lines here, even though everything around us is telling us that we should. There are some things that just can't be blurred. But there's also people in different situations that are less than ideal. And just because we have applied this rigid code of standards to ourselves and our families, that this is the way that it is, you can't necessarily project those on everyone else. Because the situations are just different. There is situational ethics. There are things that come up. And that's the whole story of the 66, is of God dealing with all sorts of situations that cannot be ran or managed by a hard set of rules. And the hard set of rules, the unflinching, unbending, cold reality of the universe, are the Ten Commandments. And they are hard as nails. Go read them. There is no wiggle room. They're very hard. So being complicated, fallible people in varying levels of difficulty and attacks with the adversary constantly at your heels, to look at those 10 commandments and to try to look at those at the standard. I mean, when you look at them, you can't help but just be depressed, because they are a reminder to us of how far we've fallen from the ideal that God has laid out for us. So those commandments are there as that looking glass, that mirror to us. If we ever start getting up too high up on our high horse, we ever start thinking that we have arrived, we are now righteous people. Now, I've met people like that before, haven't you? They're insufferable. They're the worst type, where they actually believe that they're without sin, that they've made it. And those people always, without fault, always look down on the rest of us as being the filthy unwashed. The good news, though, is that we don't have to meet that standard, because someone has done it for us, and that's been extended to us. There was a man that was able to overcome sin and to walk according to those 10 commandments and not to break them, and that was the Son of God. That has been given to you as a proxy, to accept his life as your own. Now, you can accept it and you can lose it. Let's not get into that nonsense of once saved, always saved. That's not true. That's not biblical. That's a dangerous doctrine of devils. What it means is that you're onward and upward. Hopefully, the year after you have committed yourself, accepted this gift, that you are moving upward, that you are more honest, that you have less anger problems, that you spend more time and are more attentive to your children, that you're accepting the change that comes, that God is making, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, which is remodeling you from the inside out. You need to always be moving up and under construction. And if that happens the day after you accept it, you still receive the benefit. If it happens, it may be you accept it early in your life and you have to go through the Christian walk, the struggles of life for 40 or 50 years. You still have the same reward at the end. Yeah. I think me having such a black and white opinion or a black and white stance on everything is really a direct result of just the environment I was raised in. It's us against them. It's our church is the remnant, and it's us against the world, and just so many rules and regulations that it just formed a particular character of just very black and white way of looking at things. And the hardest part is finding that middle ground of being flexible enough to understand that people are in different situations and that your rigid rules may not be appropriate for them, or it may not be applied, or might be a harsh or overly harsh judgment. You have to be careful of walking that line and not go too far where you become a Unitarian and accepting everything and not having any standards whatsoever. And that's where we're really under attack. There's a lot of good people being deceived right now with the whole trans movement. You know, those people that are wearing the rainbow and representing, showing up, and there are many of them that are direct adversaries of us, that their intentions are evil, whether it be grooming or any personal benefit that they might find, or a way to feed their sexual deviancy. There's a large segment, let's not kid ourselves, that is their motivation. But there are an equally large segment of just do-good people that they're looking at it like, well, of course we don't want anyone to get beat up. We don't want anyone to be discriminated against. We want everyone to be treated well and kind. But they're the ones that are the worst. They're the milquetoast people. Some of them, many of them, are even hanging the flags on churches, or even professing to be people of the book. And that's the worst type. That's the lukewarm that the good book talks about. God says, I'd rather you be hot or cold. I'd rather you be my enemy or my friend. But the fact that you try to bridge a gap, you try to sit on the fence in the middle, somewhere in the middle ground, not taking a side because you don't have the courage to do it, is revolting to me. It's such an offense to me that I would vomit you out of my mouth, as it's put in the old King James. And that's where the majority of people are sitting right now. And what they're doing by doing that, thinking that they're being all inclusive, thinking that they are the peacemakers in the final days, they're working against God. God is dividing right from wrong right now, as we opened the show with. He's separating the goat from the sheep. There's a divergence going on. We're getting wider each day. The herd, whether you be the goat or the sheep, you're getting wider and wider. There's a bigger and bigger gulf between us. And you have the people, the image of people sitting in the middle, like their legs going further and further into the split, trying to build a bridge, concessions. Can't we all just get along? A little bit of this and a little bit of that, we'll just mix it up into the beautiful melting pot, and everybody will just be happy and everything will be the perfect utopia. But God has told us it won't be that way, and is setting it up not to be that way. He's dividing his people. And you're working against him, it seems to me, if you're trying to make that happen. You need to choose a side, beloved. Whatever it may be, choose your side and draw your battle line. It's time to stop making concessions. It's time to stop capitulating. It's time to stop using their vocabulary. It's just time to stop all of that. And what does that mean for us as a country? I don't see how it can mean anything else than we're going to have to divide from one another. We cannot coexist with these people. We have seen the rhetoric. We have seen and are experiencing the violence. We cannot coexist with these people, even though they're family members, even though they're fellow countrymen, fellow women, fellow men. We cannot coexist. We cannot force something to happen that God is pulling apart. And that, I think, those of us that are hearing this and understanding this should be a great relief to us, because it takes to remove some of the responsibility or the burden and the guilt that we're carrying around, that we haven't tried enough, made enough concessions, or done enough. It's out of our hands at this point. So I think as a group here, I think we are at the point now where we can stop making the concessions. I'm not participating in this anymore. I'm not accepting these pronouns. I'm not accepting these ideas that everyone's the same, and if a man wants to do this, he can do that. No. We need to publicly come out and say it like it is. There are two sexes. There's a man and there's a woman. Anything else is a perversion, and most likely, well, I don't wish them any ill will. I certainly don't wish any harm upon them, but I understand now that we cannot coexist. So there will be a separation, and ultimately, where's that going to get? Is it going to get to the point where it leads to a civil war? Does it lead to a point where it means the redrawing of state lines? It's possible. I never thought it would have been possible, but there's more and more chatter on this, and there's more and more noise on the internet every day that this idea, this what was once a crazy conspiracy idea is actually it could actually happen. And when those lines are drawn, it's going to be us against them. And the biggest problem is that you have the most powerful people in the world that are controlling our governments, that are controlling our media and everything we hear, that are pouring gas on it, that are looking for any small opportunity or an outlier to pour that gas on it, to whip that up, and to get as many people riled up as possible, and to foster a hatred between multiple groups. That's what we're going to have to deal with. So violence is most likely violence is going to be a more common thing that we're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to really be smart when you go out. You're going to need to take a hard look at your stance on personal protection, on your personal training, on what you're carrying, where you're going, how you're conducting yourself, whether or not your wife and children are going out unattended. There's a lot of things that are changing in this world, and if you're not waking up to that and you think that this is craziness, then you might be in the wrong camp. Are you sitting on the fence trying to make peace when God has ordained otherwise? Are you fighting against God? I think it's high time to make a decision, whatever that may be. Make the decision that you think is right, who's on the winning side, and double down on it and go with it. Because I know for us that we're done making concessions. We're not wearing masks anymore. We're not taking vaccinations. We're not doing a lot of things that many of us maybe made concessions in the past. That ship has sailed. And I don't want violence, don't advocate violence whatsoever. But I will defend me and mine to the death. To the death. There's no level. There's nothing that I wouldn't do. There's no stone I wouldn't unturn to protect my loved ones. And I've already resolved how far I'm willing to go. And I've already resolved where my lines in the sand are. And I've already worked it out with myself, with my family, and with my God. And I will go to my grave with a clear conscience, knowing that I did what is right. Because a man is worse than an infidel that is not willing to fight tooth and nail to protect his loved ones. Let's not be confusing any of this turn the other cheek nonsense with the obligations of a Christian man to his family. Bit of a dark live stream today, isn't it? Sometimes that's the way it goes. We have a super chat from Mr. Anthony Arroyo. Welcome. Shout out to you, Anthony. And a new member, Speed Main Battle Toaster. Man, that's a good name. Speed Main Battle Toaster and brand new member. Welcome. Thank you, Speed. He writes, my church, which is Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, holds to the Reformers' view that the Pope is the Antichrist, but we still believe the first day is the Sabbath. Yeah, no, I get it. This is a very entrenched thing. Yeah. The Pope, you're not the only one that believes the Pope is the Antichrist. I assure you about that. Now, question is this a salvation issue? I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it can be. I think, again, it depends. If you have heard this and you've been convicted, or you've maybe come upon this on your own reading and understanding, it's like, you know what, I think maybe we're on the wrong track. And yet you push it away for convenience because it's inconvenient for you to do it. You might be in a very different position than someone that devoutly believes and is sincerely wrong. But one thing that I am concerned about, and I would leave you with this, is that the question is, can you be saved if you're completely wrong about something that is foundational doctrine to people of the book, people of the way? If you're completely foundational wrong about this, but you're sincere, are you safe from the judgment? Sincere, like sincerely wrong, really truly believe something. I would say, it seems to me I would have to say Yes. But I also know that the good book tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and understanding. So I also know that if you are truly searching for truth in prayer and study and fasting, that you are truly searching, that's the most important thing to you, to know the truth and to know your God, that He would not leave you ignorant to this important truth. So that's my concern, that just because you are devout and you're sincerely incorrect, I don't know that that's an excuse. Just following orders, is it? I don't know. But I find that hard to believe, that if you are devoutly, especially in these end times, seeking the truth. I'm here giving this truth here. A lot of you are hearing this for the first time. This is how it works. This is how God is getting the message out with me and with lots of other people. And the church has been preaching that for a long time. And maybe they were wrong about it. Maybe they didn't understand it. So, I'm not judging or condemning anyone. That's not my job. My job is to make available the truth as I understand it. I have to have that obligation. I would be guilty if I'm going to stand up here and be professing to be teaching the gospel or sharing the gospel. I've got to share. I can't hide things that are inconvenient. And that's incredibly inconvenient. Can you imagine what an upheaval that would be in the Scotland Presbyterian Church as a whole if the man in charge of that organization comes to this truth and says, we're going to make a few changes around here? You think that would go smoothly for him? Do you think he would keep his job? I do not see this realization coming from the leadership of the big churches, to be honest with you. I just don't see that happening. I'd see it happening as a grassroots, on the fringes, on the margins of people that are actually really seeking the truth, rather than just being spoon-fed a dogma or a doctrine sheerly out of tradition. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, just hearing myself state that, like the arrogance and the chutzpah of some dude on the internet sitting in a shop, going against thousands of years of tradition. I mean, just the arrogance of that is breathtaking. But man, you got to, truth is truth, right? Wherever it comes from. Our organizations, churches, and everything have been wrong about many things. With time and the changing of times comes truth and revelation. Things change. New things come, new understandings. And did God not tell us in prophecy that right now, back in the days of Christ, you see through a glass dimly, but in the final days that things will snap into focus. Things you thought to be true, you realize were not. Goodness, I mean, it's the cheek is staggering when you think about it. But I'm not judging. I'm not judging. I'm just sharing the truth as I know it to be. We have another super chat from Sped Main Battle Toaster. Thank you for your generosity. And new member, let's not forget that. Christ said he would never lose one of his sheep. Yeah, he said that no one can pluck them out of my hand. Now when is that though? That will be after a certain time when his sheep are sealed. But we know of many examples of Christ's sheep that have been plucked from him in the past. How about King Saul? King Saul, he was plucked from God. So I think what that means, that's something I need to go back in and study a little bit. I think what that means is that there was a time towards the end where God had separated the goats from the sheep, where the stamp of righteousness, the stamp of Christ, for lack of a better word, has been put on the remnant, on a group of people, and that they, at this point, are safe. They are sealed, that their fate has been, the fate of all men has been decided. The door has been closed, so to speak. God, these are deep waters here. These are important issues, though. We have a new member, Mr. Alan Hammer. Welcome, Alan. Shout out to you. And Mr. Jason Barr writes, I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh, in which I will give for the life of the world. Yeah. I'll close with this, the first book of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God, and all things were made with him, through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Can you imagine giving a gift to your children, the greatest gift ever given, a gift of eternal life, the opportunity to not have to pay the wages of sin, which is death, that someone else paid it for you, and to not accept it. And not only not to accept it, but to spit in his face. Can you imagine offering a precious gift to someone, and not only did they not accept it graciously, but they punched you in the head and spit on you, set your house on fire? Can you imagine how difficult it would be to have mercy upon people like that? And yet God does this every day. And not only that, those of us who have professed to be his children and to love him, how quick are we to run away, chase our own wants, lusts, and desires, and knowing better? He likens to people like us that of a dog that returns to its vomit. Oh, goodness. Well, we have a lot to think about this weekend, this coming Sabbath. So I encourage you to let every man be convinced in his own mind. But unfortunately, I've brought this to your attention, and now you have to deal with it. You're going to have to make a decision on it. So maybe that might be something that we would want to consider to corporately bring to God for clearance and for clarification and understanding for our month of fasting this Wednesday. Just an idea. All right. Thank you, beloved. May God bless you and your families. I ask you, please keep my family in your prayers. We will be praying for you as well. Those of you who will be enjoying the Sabbath, I wish you a blessed Sabbath as well, and keep us in your prayers. May God bless all of you. We'll see you guys, see you members probably on Sunday. The rest of you we'll see, Lord willing, next Monday.